Someone in the chat brought up Tether, and they're like, isn't Tether an altcoin, or isn't Tether a shit coin? And why is Max pushing Tether or whatever? So explain that.
Right. Tether is a virtual dollar, right? It doesn't compete with Bitcoin. It's not a Bitcoin competitor to Bitcoin. It's essentially a competitor to the dollar, the US dollar. It's a digital version of the US dollar.
The stable coin.
Yeah, it's a stable coin. Right. And it's a virtual dollar that people use when they're in the digital space and trading in and out of digital securities. They can trade in and out of a Tether dollar as a surrogate, that because things tend to be priced in dollars around the world, so you're familiar with that pricing, things tend to be priced in dollars. So if you want to trade in and around the digital universe and you want to be in quote unquote dollars for accounting purposes, but you don't want to own actual US dollars, you want to surrogate a virtual US dollar, there's Tether. So Tether is, it's like a money market, right? I mean, if you go to Merrill Lynch and you trade your IBM stock and the money is swept out of the stock and into the money market. Okay, the money market is a surrogate. It's a product. It's made up of, they try to maintain a peg, and it's made up of a lot of different things, T-bills and various other things. It's a soup of financial instruments that create the money market, which is a dollar surrogate. It's not dollars. I mean, there are different versions of dollars. There's liquid like a dollar, but it's not dollar. It's a virtual dollar. The virtual specialist patent 5950176, which was filed in 1996, is the Keiser patent on virtual currencies, virtual market making, and virtual securities. I invented virtual currencies. I have the patent on virtual currencies. That was in turn sold to Cantor Fitzgerald in 2001. They use it to trade virtual securities at Cantor Fitzgerald, which ironically, guess who the biggest buyer or of seller of treasury bills to Tether to back their virtual dollar is Cantor Fitzgerald. So they're using my technology, the virtual specialist, Howard Lutnick, who runs Cantor Fitzgerald, bought my technology. Flash forward 13 years, he's using it to maintain his portfolio of digital assets, virtual dollars, to that Tether invests in with the proceeds from those who are participating in Tether. Because Tether, when you are dealing with Tether, they don't pay any interest on your Tether, because then it would be a security. So, and they're not, nobody in America can touch Tether because they're not licensed or have any registration in the US, because the US is a bad actor when it comes to these things. So they didn't bother with that. So now they're worth like $96 billion. It's an incredibly large asset, Tether dollars. And they put all that $96 billion into treasury bills at Cantor Fitzgerald, and they make 5% a year. They're making like $8 billion a year in cash at Tether on the interest from putting all the Tether that the people use in digital space in treasury bills at Cantor Fitzgerald. So it's a digital virtual dollar, and it doesn't pretend to be like one of these other shitcoins that are promising returns or a pop or a gain or better than Bitcoin, right? It's not saying that. It's at $1 today. It'll be at $1 tomorrow. It's a stable coin. It's pegged to the dollar. You don't speculate with Tether. It's not going up or down. It's $1 today. It'll be $1. It's like a money market. It's a tool.
Yeah.
And it's in a different classification. In El Salvador, in fact, it has its own separate stable coins, have a separate legal representation. They're not included in the Bitcoin law at all. It's a separate, they're given a separate designation, entirely separate in El Salvador, and treated completely separate. They're not treated in the same law where you find Bitcoin legislation on Bitcoin.
And they're not looked at like the shit coins either, the stable coins. They're
right. The shit coins are in the Bitcoin law, says that anything that's not Bitcoin needs to be registered as a security. Now, okay, so that's the law. And so that takes care of Bitcoin and shit coins. If you're a shitcoiner, you have to register as a security, and if to trade it. I mean, people can show up with a hard, with some like Binance coin on a drive or whatever. We're not going to get arrested for that. We can't trade it anywhere. You can't trade it on an exchange because it would be an unregistered security. But with Tether, it's the first of its kind. I was there during the birth of Tether. I was part of the advisory group when they invented Tether. And
you're the Forrest Gump of finance and Bitcoin. You've been a historian in every piece of history. Like, this is amazing to hear this.
Tether was, it was a way. The history of Tether really is that in the early days of Bitcoin trading, when you had different exchanges in the world, the price was different on different exchanges by 5%, 10% sometimes. So you could create. There's a lot of arbitrage opportunity. You could buy Bitcoin in Dubai and sell it in New York and capture 10% on an arbitrage. But to do that, you would need to use Tether as the vehicle to get from one to the other without having to go through the U.S. dollar system.
Mm-hmm.
So Tether was like a layer of plumbing, if you will, financial plumbing that was added to the digital space. And people didn't really think much of it at the time, and it didn't really grow so much. And in fact, the original founders sold the whole thing for peanuts. And then when interest rates were near zero for years and years, it wasn't really obvious that Tether had any value. But over the last 18 months, interest rates went from 0.5% on the 10-year bond to 5% and 6%. So, and it was the fastest increase in interest rate in history in the last 18 months. So suddenly, Tether's had a remarkable business that they can simply just put this instrument they could use to buy treasury bills. And now it's one of the most profitable enterprises in the world. I mean, they on a profit per head count per employee, they're probably 20 times more profitable than their nearest competitor. I think there's only 20 people that work at Tether, whereas BlackRock, they're more profitable than BlackRock. BlackRock has thousands of employees, but they're more profitable than BlackRock. I believe. From the last time I looked at the numbers, the amount of profit that they generate is enormous, and good for them. I mean, they developed a product. It's a good product. It does what it's supposed to do, but it doesn't compete with Bitcoin. It's nothing to do with Bitcoin. It's a virtual dollar. It competes with the dollar. That's why, I mean, in the United States, there's the second biggest stablecoin, Circle, which was created like as a Tether, clone or a Tether copycat. They pay interest on their deposits on their coin, and so that's technically a security. And so to get around going to jail, this guy Jeremy Allaire, I think, who runs it, he spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on lobbyists in Washington, D.C. to protect him and his crooked empire of a stable coin called Circle, which is a piece of shit, which will eventually be bought by BlackRock. That's the only exit strategy for Circle, because they lose money on every trade. They can't make any money at Circle because they pay out more than they can possibly earn on having the reserves on deposit. So they're buying customers. They lose, the old joke is, we lose money on every pair of shoes we sell, but we're going to make it up on volume. Right? That's Circle. They lose money on every trade they do, but they think they're going to make it up on volume, right? This guy, Jeremy Allaire, is like a complete dum-dum. So